Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
There was no warning, just light. Blinding, white, and wrong. It split the night sky over Maracai Prime, a molten spear from orbit. Streets once crowded with dusk markets and wandering singers became ash lines and silence. Children evaporated mid-step. Mothers reached, but arms turned to vapor before their screams could form. Sirens didn't wail. They choked on static. High above, the Kulveth ships hung in orbit like black teeth, angled, silent, surgical. They didn't declare war. They came to show dominance. The defenders of Maracai, the tall, translucent-skinned Sirothe, weren't built for war. Their grace was in biology, diplomacy, memory, the kind of race that remembered every favor, the kind that had once saved Earth from burning during its last nuclear decade. Now, they stood on crumbling balconies, watching their cities unravel with no answers in their hands. Soldiers tried. They launched gleaming spires of energy from ground stations, too few and too slow. The Kulveth swallowed them in kinetic storm bursts, shockwaves that turned mountain ranges into trenches. In the central dome of Serath's Promise, the last surviving city core, High Orator Elenqual, bled from the ears. His breath misted the cold glass as he leaned against the observation shell. He watched another spire collapse, a flash of green brilliance followed by a cloud of red and dust. Behind him, aides lay still, some crushed by support beams, others burned by feedback from the failing command net. His people had no fleets, no allies nearby, no time left. The Kulveth had come not for conquest, but for erasure. Elenqual's eyes clouded, not with fear, but memory. Everyone will forget us, he thought. Even the ones we saved. We will die alone. And across the galaxy, Earth watched. In the black fortress orbiting Europa's far dark side, buried where no sensor could peer, an old man with war-etched skin stared at the footage. He said nothing. His name was Marshal Rourke Halden, and 35 years ago, he had lost a daughter in the fires of Kov. That day, the Sirothe had come, not with weapons, but with med ships and cryo-evacuators. They saved 1 million human children, while Earth burned around them. He remembered. The galaxy had moved on. Earth had not. The footage ended. Static. Then silence. Then a chime. Deep. Mechanical. Ancient. Across the oceans of Earth, black satellites began to turn. Hidden hangars beneath the Himalayas exhaled steam for the first time in decades. Subterranean bunkers in old Siberia hissed open vaults with keys only veterans had memorized. No debates, no broadcasts, no speeches. Just the sound of steel awakening. In the inner belt, a wandering freighter called the Ravlin Stray picked up a sensor ghost. It didn't match any shipping lane, any registry. Massive, dark, running cold. By the time the crew turned to look, the object was already gone, folded into silence. The pilot, a Venchari merchant, squinted at the screens and whispered in his native tongue. I thought they were gone. Back on the ruins of Maracai Prime, Elenqual coughed blood onto the glass. One eye swollen shut, he triggered a last failsafe buried in forgotten code, a signal older than this city. He whispered into the static. Terran, we stood for you. Now stand for us. Then silence, and somewhere beyond the reach of memory, an old Terran destroyer came alive. No flag, no transmission. Only fire, waking in the dark. The year was 2139. Earth should have died. It should have ended in fire and thunder beneath the twin hammers of its own stupidity. Reactor storms over the eastern seaboard, orbital collisions blacking out half the globe. 23 factions detonating clean and dirty nukes in territorial spasms across a burning planet. Cities bled. Satellites rained down like stars in mourning. Crops died under ash-colored skies. Oceans turned gray. Then the ships came. Not Kulveth. Not invaders. Sirothe. They arrived in orbit without a sound, cloaked not in stealth, but shame. Not because they feared humanity, but because they had waited too long. Watched too long. The violence should have ended us, but instead, they intervened. Quietly. Surgically. A continent's worth of children were lifted from craters in suspension cradles. Wounded civilians were stabilized inside biomist tanks. Massive wildfires were snuffed by drones that used atmospheric micro-adjustment to redirect wind patterns. They didn't build monuments. They didn't ask for praise. They didn't colonize. They saved what they could, left without a word, and vanished from the skies. But Earth remembered. Marshal Rourke Halden remembered more than most. He had been 17, face covered in soot and cracked blood, dragging his little sister across glass-strewn metro ruins in what was once Chicago. His sister had stopped breathing twice before the beam of Sirothe light found them. 2 days later, she was alive, blinking under soft blue glow on one of their mercy ships. They didn't speak. They didn't ask who fired what first. They just helped. Now, 35 years later, Rourke stood inside a shadow-lit command chamber deep under the Black Fortress, staring at that same light on a projection screen. This time, not a rescue beam, but the death of a city. Sarath's promise, dissolving under Kulveth fire. A memory lived in him, burned in him. Around him, 5 men in black uniforms waited silently, all veterans of the Kov fires, all remembered the debt. He raised his hand. One word. Begin. Elsewhere, in an underwater facility off the Mariana Trench floor, a technician named Steve Anderson sealed the lid on a cryo vault marked with an old Sirothe symbol. He had never met one of them, but his father had. A refugee from the Ash Belt. The Sirothe had pulled him from under a collapsed reactor silo when no one else even knew he was alive. Now, Anderson activated Fleet Trigger Code 77 Helix, knowing exactly what it meant. Above, an elevator shaft filled with blue light. Railgun silos rotated into position for the first time in 3 decades. Drones woke. Engines hummed. No command line, no official sanction, only the weight of memory. He still remembered the man who'd stood here a decade ago. War-etched, quiet, staring at the ice like it could thaw memory. When the Sirothe call, Halden had said, "Don't wait for orders. Move." Kravich had never forgotten. In the Midgard anchorage, buried under old Siberian ice, Commander Thalis Kravich stood before a unit of soldiers in gunmetal exo-armor. His voice was low, dry, without pride. "Orders are not incoming. Orders were given 35 years ago. You all know what the Sirothe did, how many lives they saved. Now they're dying." He paced once across the frost-slick floor. "They never asked for payment. They never will. So we'll answer for them." The men nodded. Not one had raised a voice. Back in orbit, A ship that hadn't moved in a generation rotated toward its first target vector. Its hull was blackened with micro-meteorite scars. Its name, long painted over, re-emerged as armor plates slid back. TNS Brimstone Rook. The crew hadn't heard from High Command in decades, but the activation key carried one voice. Older, gravel-edged, unmistakable. You disobeyed once, Commander. This time, I trust you to do it again. Hesk said nothing when he heard it. He simply stood up and walked to the bridge. His crew had been cryo-trained for 3 decades. Awakened now, they spoke like veterans, shaking the rust off old instincts. Commander Vorian Hesk, once disgraced in the Kov reprisals for disobeying a civilian strike order, now stood on the bridge. He turned to his helm officer. Coordinates? The young man responded without hesitation. Marikai Prime, Sirothi Space, under siege. Vorian nodded. Light the path. Engines flared to life. The Brimstone Rook folded into slipspace like a fist into a storm cloud. Across the dark of the Orion Arm, old systems blinked back to life. Silent Outpost 19, online. Ghost Lance Dreadpack, en route. Project Gravetide. Greenlit. No diplomats. No UN votes. No Senate oversight. This war wasn't authorized. It was owed. Far from all of it, under the burnt skies of Marikai Prime, High Orator Elenqual lay broken, bleeding, his final message still echoing across dead channels. He did not know if anyone heard. He only knew what he taught his people to believe. That honor, once given, will always find its way home. No speeches, no flags, no crowds. Just the sound of airlocks cycling shut in the dark. Of reactors returning to life like lungs inhaling for the first time in decades. Of ships, once thought dead, now stirring in the void. Earth moved, not with words, but with will. The TNS Brimstone Rook had cleared Neptune's shadow 2 hours ago. Its hull no longer reflected stars. Too hot now. Her fusion drives left long, spiral wakes of ghost fire as she folded through gravity wells with deliberate precision. On the bridge, Commander Vorian Hesk stood motionless, eyes fixed on the forward screen. One hand rested on the command rail. The signal had come without voice or symbol, but he knew who had sent it. Below decks, cryo crews ran drills in silence. Exo teams suited up, inspecting each other's seals with practice taps. Medical bays stocked Sirothi-compatible biomesh, even though the docs weren't sure who, if anyone, would survive to need it. They weren't flying to conquer. They were flying for debt. In the Black Fortress, buried deep beneath Europa's radiation shell, Marshal Rourke Halden stood before an ancient holomap. The symbols weren't Terran. They were Sirothi glyphs, recorded during the last exodus Earth never publicly acknowledged. Every piece was in motion, and none of them moved without his touch. A junior officer approached, saluted. No words. Halden nodded once. It had begun. Across the encrypted lattice, pre-authorized commands began to unfurl, coded for veterans only. Midgard, Brimstone, Silent Outpost. Fleet relays pulsed in the deep dark, quantum silent casts bouncing through encrypted interlaced relays. No planet-to-planet broadcasts. No transmissions that could be intercepted. Just gravity-distorted pings between sealed vessels, known only to those who had been waiting. Veterans. Commander Thalis Kravich, at the Midgard anchorage, watched rows of gunmetal exosuits lower into shock-dampened launch pods. Each pod bore a name not from Terran lore, but from the old Cyrothea honor markings, gifts from a culture that never demanded thanks. "Unit ready, sir." Kravich gave a single nod. No expression, just the stillness of someone who already knew the cost. Rook confirms vector. We fall in behind. Launch when the Rook pings. Yes, sir. Outside, the ice above began to melt from the heat of rising fusion thrusters. Elsewhere, sensors caught fragmented pings, non-verbal, coded, old Terran war patterns. The message was clear. The grave fleets were waking. At Silent Outpost 19, a black station hidden in the dead zone, old satellites blinked awake, coded to only one thing: incoming Kulveth radiation signatures. Operators looked to each other. One pressed the ignition key. The other signed a single Cyrothea symbol. Return. Moments later, orbital rail spines pivoted to receive incoming data from the Ghost Lance Dreadpack, a covert fleet once denied by every Terran government. They weren't ghosts now. Elsewhere on Earth, an old authorization sequence unlocked a sealed chamber. A silvered badge was pinned to a chest. No rank, just a symbol, a crescent split by fire. The floor shuddered. Minutes later, a black column of alloy and missile platforms lifted from the Earth. No words, no lights, just steel rising like a promise kept. On Marikai Prime, under clouds thick with soot and vaporized stone, High Orator Ellenqual stirred. He did not know how long he'd been unconscious. His blood had dried on the command glass, crackling as he moved. He reached for the console. Nothing. The city above had fallen silent. Not peace. Emptiness. He closed his eyes. And in that silence, far beyond sensor range, folded behind quantum drift, he felt something shift. Not physically. Not in tech. In pattern. In the way the void tasted. He whispered. To no one. They heard. From Saul's outer dark to Marikai's dying sky, no broadcasts were sent. But war moved anyway. Not to conquer, not for glory, but for a promise remembered in fire. They didn't hear the ships arrive. No thunder, no engine roar, no battle horns. Just sudden shapes in the ash-thick clouds. Black, angular, terrible in their silence. The Kulveth fleet, busy scouring the outer ridges of Marikai Prime, barely reacted in time. Too slow. High in orbit, beyond the shattered equatorial belt, the TNS Brimstone Rook emerged from slipspace like a blade from velvet. No lights, no signal, only calculated murder. Commander Vorian Hesk stood at the center of his bridge. Confirm directive, Hesk said. He planned for this alignment. Confirmed, replied his gunnery officer. Seconds later, the ship's spinal rail discharged a magnetic lance the size of a bus. Cold, dark, invisible in vacuum. It struck a Kulveth carrier mid-transit. The enemy ship didn't explode. It simply vanished, its hull torn into particulate by kinetic force. No screams, no alarms, just erasure. From the battered surface below, what was left of Sarath's promise watched in disbelief. Cyrothi civilians in fractured shelters stared upward as burning enemy wreckage began to rain sideways, trailing plasma arcs. They had known only fire from above. Now they saw fire striking back. A young Cyrothi child pressed a palm to the broken glass, blinking at the red trace lines across the sky. Her mother, bruised and dust-covered, whispered in disbelief. "That's not ours." No, it wasn't. The Midgard anchorage units arrived next. Atmospheric insertion at terminal velocity. No descent lights, no sonic booms. Just black darts slicing through cloud, guided by friction-shielded drop shells. Inside one of them, Commander Thales Kravich stared at the mission HUD. Heart rate steady, no words spoken. Impact in 11 seconds. 10. His pod struck ground 3 kilometers west of the Sirothi Medical Dome. He kicked the hatch open before the dust settled. His team, Unit Halleck Seth, moved in precise arcs, their exosuits compensating for Marikai's thin gravity. No yelling, no chaos. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. A Kulveth advance patrol moved to intercept. 4 gunships, 10 drones, 2 heavy walkers. Halleck Seth didn't fire immediately. Kravich waited. Calculated vectors. Wind shear, crossfire windows, civilian proximity. Then, drop all. EMP grenades, drone jammers, armor-piercing scatter. It took 11 seconds. When it was over, the Kulveth walkers were gutted at the knee. Their drones spun helplessly into the ground, hijacked by Terran counter-AI. The soldiers were gone, cut down with brutal efficiency. Inside the Sirothe Medical Dome, only 12 survivors remained. High Orator Ellenqual, barely conscious, opened his good eye to a shape moving through firelight. A man in Terran exo armor, holding a med kit designed with Sirothe biocompatibility. "You came," Ellenqual whispered. Kravich didn't answer. He just knelt beside the wounded alien and applied the stabilizer patch. Another soldier scanned the wounded, tagging those who could be safely extracted. In orbit, the Brimstone Rook conducted another pass. This time, she deployed long-range smart torpedoes, preloaded with targeting data from Earth's ancient war archives, recordings gifted by the Sirothe themselves. 4 Kulveth vessels, once untouchable, blinked off the grid. The rest began to scatter. In a fractured comms shelter, a Sirothe technician picked up a faint signal, a narrow beam pulse on a forgotten frequency. It wasn't Sirothe, it wasn't Kulveth, but the cadence, the precision, was unmistakable. Terran. Defense complete. Civilian Cluster 117 secured. Additional units inbound. Remain sheltered. Her hands trembled. She translated it aloud. One of the elders blinked, stunned. Terrans. They remember. Above, in the clouds, fire moved with precision. Terran ships didn't strafe. They executed. No stray shots. No civilian casualties. Every kill was chosen. Every impact calculated. Where the Kulveth brought fear, Earth brought judgment. In the command bay of the Brimstone Rook, Commander Hesk stared at the updated orbital chart. Enemy ships, retreating. Civilians, stabilized. Surface forces, holding. He said one word. Continue. The skies of Marikai Prime were still burning, but now, for the first time in days, they were burning in the other direction. The landing zones weren't secure. They were taken, in silence with steel. Where the Kulveth expected burning craters and messy drop zones, they found Terran units already entrenched, their weapons deployed in overlapping fields of fire, not panic. No banners, no anthem, just discipline. Commander Thales Kravich moved through rubble like a shadow, his armor streaked with ash and alien blood. Unit Halleck Seth had cleared 4 civilian sectors in 36 minutes without a single loss. One building still stood, battered but intact, draped in dust-smeared Sirothe glyphs. Kravich led 2 Marines through the half-collapsed corridor. Inside, a family of 6 huddled behind shattered shielding. A child had lost a leg. The father clutched a blunt piece of metal, ready to die standing. The moment he saw the Terrans, his grip loosened. He recognized the armor. Terran responders had worn the same mark during Earth's evacuation decades ago. One of the Marines, helmet still on, knelt beside the injured child. She opened a med pack and pulled a blue-tinted synth flesh patch, one of the Sirothii-compatible upgrades stocked aboard the Brimstone Rook. She applied it gently, carefully. The child didn't scream. Outside, the wind carried the deep-throated rumble of a Kulveth artillery crawler. 10 meters tall, 6 legs, skin like charred stone. 2 forward plasma turrets. Kravich opened his comm. "Brimstone, we've got crawler class inbound. Estimate 20 seconds. The reply came in Commander Vorian Hesk's voice, calm as always. "Solution is in the air." Seconds later, a sharp crack rolled over the district. Above, a hypersonic glide shell tore the sky in half, descending at Mach 11. It struck the crawler dead center, slicing through the hull like a scalpel before detonating underground. No collateral damage. The crawler never fired. In the Sirothei refugee quarters, High Orator Ellen Quall lay propped up against a reinforced med stretcher. His face was pale, his breathing ragged, but his eyes were locked on the Terran soldiers moving among his people. They weren't here to command. They were listening, helping, moving with care and speed. One Sirothei nurse looked up at him. "I didn't think they'd come." Ellen Quall smiled weakly. "They came because they remember. And that memory is why we're still alive." Down the southern ridge, Unit Halak Seth encountered resistance. Kulveth infantry, heavier than expected. Kravich didn't shout. He gestured. 3 short signals. Flank left, arc fire, hold threshold. The Marines moved like parts of a single weapon. The Kulveth formation buckled, not from overwhelming force, but from tactical suffocation. Every move they made had already been calculated. Their fallback point was cut. Their heavy gunner found his weapon fused by a precision drone shot before he could deploy. As smoke lifted from the burned district, civilians began to move again. Tentatively, slowly. An elder approached one of the Terran Marines. He carried a memory core orb, scarred but intact. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. The Marine nodded. "A record," he said. "Your story." The elder held it out. "Then take it, keep it, so you will never forget that we remember you too." The Marine took it with both hands. From orbit, Commander Hesk watched the dropship telemetry feed. "Multiple ground clusters stabilized," his XO said. He nodded once. "Phase 2, deep exfil. Let's bring them home." Across Marikai Prime, fires still burned. But under Terran protection, life endured. Where Kulveth shock troops had found easy kills, now they found flanking ambushes, AI-guided counters, and surgical precision. Terran boots didn't march to music. They moved to memory. The Kulveth had never been outmaneuvered. They overwhelmed. They dominated. Their doctrine was terror, their currency destruction. But now, they were losing. Not in a blaze of chaos, but to something worse. Precision. The Brimstone Rook hovered in high polar orbit, her silhouette hidden behind Marikai's ice-locked moon. No sensor could track her. No beam gave her away. Inside, Commander Vorian Hesk stood over the tactical grid, watching the enemy collapse in real time. 3 Kulveth carriers had shifted position, not randomly, reactively. They were scared. "Ghost Lance is ready," the XO said. "Send the pattern," Hesk replied. A moment later, 26 stealth platforms flickered out of the outer field, small, near-invisible Terran gunships that had not fired a single shot until now. Each deployed 6 drone phantoms, non-emitting, reflective units trailing false warp signatures. The Kulveth chased ghosts, and the moment they overcommitted, the trap closed. Down on Marikai's southern quarter, Commander Thalis Kravich received the uplink code, just as his team secured the last transmission tower. "Collapse net verified," came the encrypted message. He raised one gloved fist. "Set detonators. Pull back to fallback arc." The Kulveth squad pushing into the quarter didn't see the charges hidden in the fractured irrigation conduits. They surged forward, and the ground gave way beneath them. Directed charges turned water mains into blades. Gravity coils tore apart their exosuits. By the time the dust cleared, Terran units were already repositioned 2 blocks behind them. Not a single bullet wasted. From her makeshift bed, High Orator Ellen Quall watched the impossible happen. He listened as Sirothi scouts reported. "Western approaches, clear. Northern quadrant, quiet." Sky traffic, reduced to Kulveth fragments running cold. He turned to the Terran medic monitoring his vitals. "You are?" "Turning the sky itself." The medic, a junior corpsman from the Brimstone's drop detachment, adjusted the display without fanfare. "Not turning it," he said, "just giving it back." In space, the Kulveth command ship turned hard along an unexpected axis, erratic, even for them. The move was a sign of desperation. Hesk noticed it immediately. "They're retreating into an asteroid cluster," his sensor chief said. "No," Hesk replied. "They think they're leading us in." He keyed a silent command. "Project Gravetide. Phase Initiate." Below the system's ecliptic plane, launch tubes hidden inside hollowed asteroids opened, ejecting swarms of self-guided mines, each seeded with predictive AI built on old Sirothai computational principles. These weren't brute force weapons. They were anticipation engines. By the time the Kulveth entered the field, every escape vector was already mined. The first detonation shattered their communications cruiser. The second tore through their supply arm. The third, coordinated with a decoy charge from Silent Outpost 19, obliterated their command deck. The Kulveth began to fracture, unit by unit. No coordination, no cohesion. Kravich's team on the ground heard the change before they saw it. The thunder from above stopped. The crackling bombardment ceased. The enemy's formations wavered, not because they were outgunned, but because their link was broken. "They've lost structure," Kravich muttered. "Collapse them." His Marines advanced not with celebration, but method. Every corridor, every rooftop, every stairwell cleared, not for vengeance, for balance. In the refugee dome, a Sirothai youth handed a piece of carved crystal to one of the Terran medics. "What is it?" she asked. "Our word for memory," the youth said. "But it also means justice." She tucked it into her armor's chest pocket. Back aboard the Rook, Hesk received the final report. Kulveth command tree, neutralized. Remaining vessels, fragmented. FTL traces detected. Full retreat likely. He gave no speech, no command to pursue. "Pull back patrols," he said. "No further engagement." "Sir," his weapons chief asked, "we could finish them." Hesk shook his head. "They don't deserve closure. Let them run. Let them remember." He turned back toward the stars. Justice is served. The debt is paid. They'll carry that with them further than any wound. Across the stars, silence spread. Not the silence of defeat, the silence of consequences. The last Kulveth ship vanished into a corridor of fractured space. No pursuit followed. No victory roar. Just the soft collapse of tension across an entire world. From orbit, the TNS Brimstone Rook drifted above Marikai Prime, her drives cooling. Scars now marked her hull. Plasma grazes, railgun splinters. But she held her orbit steady. She had not come for glory. She had come to end something. In the dusted remains of Serath's promise, Commander Thales Kravich stood on the ruined edge of a Sirothe plaza. It was once a temple to memory, now reduced to half-collapsed arches and blackened stone. But the center still held, a basin carved from silver-veined crystal, filled now not with ceremonial mist, but water. Clean. Cold. Kravich removed one gauntlet. He dipped his hand in. He didn't speak. One by one, survivors came forward. Sirothe elders, wounded children, medics with bandaged limbs, and followed his gesture. Together, they restored the ritual. Not for worship, for continuity. High above, in the Black Fortress, Marshal Rourke Halden watched the transmissions. No press briefings, no public announcements. The files were already archived, sealed. He added one note to the record. Debt paid in full, Marikai stable, Terran withdrawal authorized. He sat back, staring into the dark of Europa's orbit. His hand hovered over the console's final command, Fleet, stand down. He pressed it. Inside the Brimstone's med bay, a young Sirothi child sat upright for the first time in 3 days. The Terran medic beside her offered a small object, clear, curved, etched with Earth-standard glyphs. The child tilted her head. "What is it?" The medic smiled. "It's called a keepsake. It means we won't forget." In the loading bay, Commander Vorian Hesk oversaw the extraction of final personnel. No flag was planted, no monument raised. He passed the old Sirothe orb, the memory core, to one of his junior officers. "Take it to Halden." "Sir?" "They kept our names alive after Earth nearly died. Now we keep theirs." The officer nodded, securing the orb in a pressure vault lined with Terran honor markers, one per saved world, most long gone. On Marikai's surface, the air cleared. The clouds thinned. Sunlight touched the broken streets again. The survivors gathered near the southern ridge, where the worst fighting had unfolded. There, Kravich's team had left no flag, no signature. Only a single marker, carved in Sirothea glyphs and Terran standard below it. In silence, we remembered. In silence, we repaid. Hours later, the Brimstone Rook's engines pulsed once. No music, no farewells, just departure. The ship ascended slowly, folding into slipspace like a shadow behind light. The sky grew still. In the last lines of his log, Marshal Halden recorded a final message. Not for Earth, not for command. For the Sirothe. "You saved us once, without demand, without question. We never forgot. Now we leave you standing, not as debtors, but as equals. The galaxy will forget." "We won't!" And so Earth left. No occupation, no empire, only silence, and a name honored where it mattered most. In memory.